So, Octavio, why did you write this book? It was a beautiful day when my father died.
Well, what had happened is that over the years in traveling to India or Tajikistan and throughout Europe and in different parts of the States,
Yeah.
I gave this talk on forgiveness. And I had a church assistant that worked for me who said, you ought to put this talk in a book. It really helped me dealing with stuff with my dad
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. And so I had a year where I was taking care of my mother-in-law. So I had a lot of downtime. I was her primary caregiver.
Yeah.
So I wrote it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as you wrote this book, it's about your father. Tell
Yep.
us a little bit about your father and what he was like.
So if you see me, you've seen the Father, and I know that's a biblical reference, but I'm a carbon copy of my dad, and for many, many years, because of I refer to him as a AAA dad. He was an alcoholic, he was a physical abuser, and an adulterer. And often the family was on the receiving end of that, and of course there was a lot of collateral fallout from that. So I opened up the book describing the first beating that I can recall at 7, and really just how I failed as a person in not practicing what I knew to be better, what I preached about, what I talked about, and how the lack of forgiveness twisted me into a person where I actually became my dad by my 20s.
Yeah. Well, the book is your journey through forgiveness.
Right.
Why even forgive your dad if your dad is that AAA father, if your dad is the one who's been beating you when you were a kid?
Yeah, well, Christ said so. I mean, that's the first reason.
Yeah.
And if you're followers of Jesus, that ought to be enough, but I also recognize that it wasn't for me. And it wasn't for me because I refused to do so, and so I ignored, neglected. I've done this thing over the years in my home where I've done through the Bible studies, Genesis to Revelation, and then start over probably 6, 7 times in the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And the one set of books that I always quickly ran through and would avoid reading were the Gospels, because it was difficult to explain away the words of Jesus that was a cultural thing, or that was a misrepresentation, or it doesn't really mean what it says there. But the fact is that Jesus does mean what he says, that we ought to forgive everybody, period,
Yeah.
And so I see Christ pinned to the cross, tortured to death, saying, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing."
Yeah.
So dwelling on that, I was kind of left with no option.
Yeah.
And I had a choice to say whether I'm going to love myself more than I love God.
Yeah. Well, walk us through this a little bit more. Like, what were some of the valleys of forgiveness? What were some of those places where it was really hard to say, God, I cannot forgive my dad for this?
Yeah, well, I can remember my father died in July of 2004, and when I got the news from my brother, I remember immediately saying to him, "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss." And as a chaplain, we do a lot of death notifications, unfortunately, too many.
Yeah.
And that's an automatic thing to say. It's heartfelt, but it's the best thing you can say at the moment.
Right.
And so here I am, as a pastor, writing a sermon. My brother calls to say our dad had passed. I didn't go see him at the hospital, though he asked for me. And as far as I knew, until recently, I thought he died alone in this room. And so, I would have had a bigger reaction if he had told me the McRib was back, I had zero emotional investment in his death,
Right.
except to say, finally. So when his funeral came and I was officiating his funeral, I remember thinking, I have nothing kind to say about my father, so let me just talk about God. But as I was speaking, people would, after over the years of speaking, you begin to tell when people are dialed in and when they're not. And so they were dialed into the message. Oh, great, it's working. Which goes to show you that even a damaged person can proclaim the truth of Jesus.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, he's dead, he's gone. I had a moment alone in the chapel there at Forest Lawn. I thought, he's my dad, I should care. I went to the coffin, placed my hand on his body, and I remember just flashed back how this very now old, frail, dead man was this larger-than-life person to me. And I remember thinking, wow, there is nothing here. I feel nothing. My uncle came in, and he was a bit sorrowful. I mean, it was his brother. And I remember thinking, wow, I feel bad for Onesimo, my tío, my uncle. But I didn't feel anything. And yeah, I recall closing the lid of the coffin and walking out, pretty much moved on.
Yeah. Well, help us walk us through a little bit more than how did you learn to feel certain things to take that journey toward forgiveness?
I think if there's one thing you need to understand about forgiveness is that it's not a Sunday school felt board, forgive people and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like surgery with no anesthesia at times.
Wow.
And but also many of you, and I'll refer to this as in a body because it's the most easy metaphor to reach. There are some things that it seems like the cure is more painful than the actual disease. The therapy is, like, if this is the therapy, if this is me getting better, I'd rather stay sick. And that's what many of you have chosen to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I chose to do for many years. So whether it was, booze or porn or, getting into fights in the street. And by the way, I was a Christian.
Yeah.
So, yeah, people rather stay sick at times than listen to Christ to get well.
Yeah.
So when I forgave and had that kindness of God intercede in my history of my life, of where I was and what I was doing to myself, to my family, to others, I had a choice. I could either stay dead and be this horrible human being, or finally be set free. And I'll tell you what, it actually gave me pause. I actually thought about it.
Yeah.
Because I had been sick for so long and damaged for so long that I had no idea what it would be like to be well, and I was afraid of health. And for many of you, and people who will hear this later, I've often said that God is like anchovies. It's kind of an acquired taste. Oh, good. Somebody caught that.
Yeah.
If you could laugh louder for the tape, that'll make me sound more interesting. There you go. But I will say that, often you guys grow up in churches and they tell you to be good because we don't want you to have sex and we don't want you to drink or something. But honest, if I could tell you, I'm now in my 60s and looking back at life, you ought to follow Christ because it's the smartest thing you can do. It's stupid not to. It's irrational not to.
Wow.
The world outside of Christ is full of stupidity and violence and disease and distortion and damage. Why would you want to live there? The reason is because you're used to it. And most of you accept relationships and love and situations in your life that you think you deserve, but you don't. The Father has sent His Son to die for us and forgive us, but we practice the kingdom of God by forgiving. And let me add one more thing. I realize that a lot of you want to change the world and do good things and social justice, and I'm for you. I will applaud you, and if I can write a check, I will. But the reality is that until you clean up yourself first by forgiveness, you are a damaged person trying to help others, and you'll end up causing problems for other people. I did.
Wow. Well, I think in your book you have a lot of reflections on what forgiveness is, and you have a lot of reflections on what forgiveness is not. Help us understand what forgiveness is not and how we confuse forgiveness for other things also.
Sure. First of all, people, I think, resent the idea of forgiveness, and because over the years I would hear from, especially unfortunately, women. There hasn't been a single time I've given this talk or this workshop on forgiveness. There hasn't been at least one to a handful of women saying, I was molested. It was a family member, a coach, a teacher, people that should have known better. And how do I forgive that? The one story that sticks out of my mind is a woman in her 50s, and I think it was Lincoln that said, by your 70s, you have the face that you deserve. And she looked old, tired, and bitter. And I gave the talk on forgiveness, and she shares that from about 9 years of her childhood, her parents used to pimp her out for sex to older men.
Wow.
So how do I forgive that, she said, and we had a conversation. Forgiveness is not letting somebody off the hook. Forgiveness, first and foremost, is for you
Mm.
to be free,
Mm.
to be well,
Mm.
to experience God more fully. It's for you. Now, I could say that Christ commands it, and hopefully that ought to be enough, but the reality is it isn't.
Right.
And so Christ allows you to go your own way. And sometimes the best teachers in life are life.
Mm.
If you bump your head against a wall hard enough, you realize, okay, this is not working. So forgiveness is not letting somebody off the hook. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness is not fair. So let me take that out of your vocabulary. Well, that's not fair. Yeah, I know. It's called forgiveness.
Mm.
By the way, the only person that could honestly say, this is not fair, was Christ, and none of you in the room are Christ.
Mm.
So you have our example, our Savior, as I said, strapped to that torture instrument saying, Father, forgive them. That's, here he says, this is the example. This is who you're supposed to be. He washes the feet of his disciples in John 13. And by the way, in the West, we all know what the dirtiest part of our body is, right? Below the knees. I mean, above the knees, below the belt, right around that region.
Yeah.
In the Middle East, it was your feet. And Peter, knowing who Jesus was, the Messiah, the Son of God, is experiencing him wash his feet. That's why Peter's reaction was so, what are you doing washing my feet?
Yeah.
And then he says, you call me Master and Lord because I am.
Mm.
If I've washed your feet, if I've given this example, you ought to do the same to others.
Wow.
So forgiveness isn't fair. It's not justice. If you say something to the effect of, well, if they apologize, or when they admit they're wrong, or if they say they're sorry, then I'll forgive. That's not forgiveness.
Mm.
It's okay if you want to say that, and it's okay if you want to, handle your relationships that way, but that's a transaction.
Mm.
If you do this, then I'll do that.
Yeah.
That's also not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not distance. Many of you, I think, came to Biola because you wanted to get the hell out of town from your family, right?
Yeah.
And then when you go back for Thanksgiving and Christmas, you realize, oh yeah, this is why I left. These are the people. How many of you wonder if you actually are part of that family? Like, was I adopted? Because these cannot be the same blood and DNA. How is this?
Right.
Yeah, forgiveness doesn't work that either. No matter how far away you get or move from a person that harmed you, you still carry the crap within you, so it doesn't matter how far you go.
Yeah.
And forgiveness is not time. There's a mythology about, well, time heals all wounds.
Mm.
Nonsense. That's also nonsense.
Yeah.
And if you've ever seen old women weeping over the children that they lost during the Holocaust, you realize that time makes no difference. In fact, I would suggest time adds to your mess.
Wow.
Listen, I want to drive this home. Time will add to your hurt, and it will add to your pain until you get it done. It's just like an illness. The longer you go without treatment, the sicker you become.
Wow. There's so much to unpack there. But we're going to call a timeout. We're going to ask our worship team to lead us in a reflection.
Okay?
And we're going to ask you guys to text in questions so that we can respond to them afterward. All right. Well, here we go. Here's our first question, Octavio.
Okay.
That's not a question, but we're going to get there.
I am 62, and I like walks in the park, and my turn-offs are.
Okay. Here we go. Do we forgive people even when they don't ask for it?
Yes. There's a favorite meme of mine that I have where
Yeah.
it's not of me, but
Yeah.
it's where Jesus says, remember to forgive everyone.
Yeah.
And then a question from the crowd says, what if they have tattoos? And then Jesus says, even if they ask stupid questions. Yes, why would you wait? Let me give you a metaphor that perhaps is a bit earthy, but you won't forget it. Do you go to the bathroom if someone doesn't ask you to go?
Yes.
You go to the bathroom when you have to go, right?
Right.
So you eat food, you metabolize some of the nutrients, and then you eliminate the rest. That's what forgiveness is like. A lot of you No matter how much your life has had some challenges, I can assure you, you're going to have more. That's just how life is. In fact, life is just a series of difficult things punctuated by moments of happiness, punctuated by moments of joyfulness. You can go through life grateful, and it changes the way you process it. But you're going to have things happen to you, and if you don't metabolize them, and then take what you can, learn from them. Like, I need to learn how to pick better friends. Why did I ignore that yellow flag in my life? How am I not practicing maybe spiritual disciplines that work for me? If you're not metabolizing the negative events and then eliminating through forgiveness, you're just hurting yourself.
Well, can I go back to your meme? You said something about tattoos. I'd love to hear about your tattoos, if you don't mind. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Over the years of violence and fights and in my own family, towards my wife and kids, on the street with strangers, they were just covered with scars and bones that were broken. And then there was an incident of self-injury where I ended up in a hospital for a couple of weeks, needed some surgery to put things back together. So my hands were a bit of an embarrassment because on cold days like this, some of the scars would be bluish and purple. And so life went on. And then as I hit my 40s and I began to learn how to forgive some things, all those scars and brokenness were no longer embarrassments. They were reminders of God's kindness to me.
Wow.
And His grace.
Wow.
So I wanted my hands to tell a different story. So my first tattoos are on my hands. Some of you have sleeves. I have gloves. And so they're all religious in nature. So it's love wins, 1 Corinthians 13:8, the rose of Sharon, the prayer beads, the Cairo, the cross, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and others. And they're all religious. The other reason is that if I'm ever maimed in a horrible accident, when the angels come, they think, oh, I think this one's ours. And so we'll take them. We'll take them, Satan.
I love that. I love that. Well, we know who you are now. I
Yeah.
love that you tell your story through the tattoos.
Right.
I love that. Well,
Thank
here's
you.
another question. Do you think Jesus' call to forgive guilty Christians into improper forgiveness?
Do you think Jesus is called
Called
to
to
forgive
forgive
guilt
Christians
Christians into
into
improper
improper
forgiveness?
forgiveness.
Oh, yeah. You know, and by the way, it's not Jesus' call. It's crappy teaching from pastors and Bible school and Bible teachers. And as a former pastor myself, I feel the liberty to say that. So we don't explain it well. We just tell you you're supposed to do it and go do it with no instruction and no unwrapping of what that actually means.
Yeah.
And no unwrapping of the fact that sometimes it's painful. Without being overly dramatic, I would imagine that when Christ said, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing, it was painful. In fact, to go further, he was at the limits of pain, physical pain, spiritual, emotional pain, and existential pain. Christ knew, God knew what it was like to be forsaken by God. Just rest on that for a moment. Some of you in your dorm rooms or as you're commuting or you're here in school, you feel like such an outsider. And there's a part of you that almost can appreciate the words of Christ, my, why have you forsaken me? Please understand that God understands what it feels like to be forsaken by God. And in the midst of that pain, he says, Father, forgive them. So no, it's not that you get called into improper forgiveness. You might have been taught incorrectly.
Wow. Here's another question. What's the difference between forgiveness and standing up for yourself?
Well, if you look at the life of Christ, there was never a place where he wasn't able to, quote, stand up for himself. But here's what I want to suggest to you, that unless you are forgiving and maintaining some sort of spiritual discipline, you might be standing up for the wrong cause at the wrong time for the wrong reason, period. This is why I despise that whole question about what's your passion? What does your heart tell you?
Right.
That's pure garbage. Understand that's pure garbage.
Yeah.
What if your heart is sick? What if your heart is damaged? What if your heart is not well? Then what you're going to want are things that are damaged and sick and not well. Forgiveness is the beginning of curing yourself so that the things you want are in alignment, in sync with or ordered after the things of God that he wants for you. Now, I am not telling you that to simply just be a good Christian and everything works out well. Well, it didn't for our Savior, right? But what I am suggesting is that when you forgive, until you are in the habit of forgiving on a regular basis, standing up for yourself may be the worst thing you can do. In fact, I will say this, that sometimes, a good portion of the time, you shouldn't win the arguments that you win. You should not win the arguments that you're fighting. You're probably wrong.
I want to stand up with you. Is that okay? Let's do this standing up now. Is that okay?
Did you want to hug? I don't know.
Let's do it like this. Let's do it like this. Okay.
All right, here we go.
You talked
Keep
about
your hand here, brother.
All right,
Keep your hand here.
You talked about cleaning up ourselves
Yeah.
before we try to help others.
Yeah.
What practices would you advise for doing this?
Okay, so here's the Sunday school answer. Read your Bible and pray. But how sick of you are you of hearing that?
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. And then you come to Biola where, and I'm grateful for the years I was here. And some of you won't appreciate it until years later. But my point is this, you go to chapels like this, of amazing speakers like this, and sometimes you just don't get a chance to appreciate the input that you're getting because it's so much.
Yeah.
They tell you to get active in the church, you got to go to chapels, you take Bible classes, you pray at everything, and you're like, I get it, you're done. My concern is that at times you get so much Christianity, it's like an inoculation against the real thing. When you practice your faith, it hurts.
Wow.
Sometimes you'll look in the mirror and you'll despise the person looking back at you. Because you're a coward, you're a whore, you're a drunk, you're a liar and a hypocrite.
Wow.
And until you experience God's forgiveness and love in that moment, I don't think you know your faith. Until some of you are going to have a colossal public failure, you won't know what it's like for God to redeem you. So what do I mean about cleaning yourself up? Hey, practice your spiritual disciplines. I'm not mocking any of that.
Right.
You are interacting with the God of eternity.
Yeah.
But understand that hopefully it moves you at some level because you realize how undeserving you are of his hand of kindness on your life.
I love that. The disciplines shape us so that
Totally.
when that time in life comes, then we know what our faith really is.
Some of you are athletes in this room, and some of you are like me instead. But those of you who are athletes, you know that you do those drills, they're mind-numbing, you're told to eat differently, you got to get your rest, all that. Well, your spiritual life is no different. It's often a lot of preparation for a moment.
Right.
But at least when you're doing your disciplines, whatever they might be, and they need to be meaningful to you, by the way, that you're also living just a healthier, kinder life. Many of you are just too damn mean for being so young. And the reason why you're mean is because you're in pain. And the reason why you're in pain is because you haven't eliminated, you haven't forgiven.
Yeah. All right. They're telling us to sit down. They don't want us to stand up anymore. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll submit to this, but I'm still standing.
Here's another question. Okay, what does self-forgiveness look like? And does it differ from the process of forgiving others?
Yeah, I remember looking up that part in the Bible about self-forgiveness, and it's not there. So I'll say this bluntly, because whoever asked that question, I love you for asking and considering this. That's a mythology. I'll say it again. It's a mythology. There's no self-forgiveness. What, are you a moral authority higher than God or equal to God that you forgive yourself? And if God has forgiven you, who is left to forgive you? As Paul says, if Christ has forgiven us, who condemns us? See, this is why I'm suggesting that perhaps, well-intentioned, you were taught forgiveness incorrectly. You know that song, Amazing Grace? Of course you do. Everybody sings it. Even people who don't go to church know it. But grace that is amazing when it hits you is actually almost embarrassing. That God would be so crazy in love with you as you are in your moment, in your brokenness, in your filth, and all your mess, that he actually adores you and loves you. That's what makes grace amazing. But in those moments, it also makes it almost embarrassing to be loved so much. And in that, when you know that, when you've experienced that, when you live in that, the concept of self-forgiveness, you'll see how ludicrous it actually is.
Wow. Here's another question. I too struggle with my relationship with my mom. She tells me she loves me, but I don't say it back because I don't love her. But I feel like I have forgiven her, but still can't say it. Thoughts?
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I mean, I can recall when my dad actually wrote a letter to me. I was in my late 40s, owning all the mess he had made, asking for forgiveness. I was pastoring a church, so as the mature Christian man that I was, I forgave him. No, wait, I didn't. I tore up the letter and threw it away and said, too little, too late.
Wow.
So I get that. Now, just put a pause in that thought. Go back to the Ten Commandments where it says to honor your mother and father, and then comma, that you may live long and prosper in the land that the Lord is going to give you. All of us have parents. Not all of us have some dad or mom issue. And unless that's restored at some level, you are going to have a life where your relationships are a challenge, your job issues are going to be a challenge. And listen, because everything is relational, you're going to have an expiration date and a limit as to how long you can sustain a relationship. You may think, oh, I met this guy, I met this woman, we're amazing together, they're so unlike my parents. Give it time. You're going to break down and screw that up because you're still damaged. Forgiveness is often like an onion, Some layers are interesting and others make you cry. So the crap and the nonsense that happened between you and your mom didn't happen overnight. And God in his kindness may release you to be able to forgive and love your mom overnight. He may. Most likely, he won't. And you'll go through the journey and the challenge and grinding it out with the Lord. But in that, it's an act of kindness from our Father in heaven who allows you to experience him in that journey that you could never have known without working it out with him.
Wow. Thank you. Here's another question. If I think that I've forgiven someone, but I still feel hurt when I think about the situation from which they were forgiven, does that mean I haven't really forgiven them?
No and yes. No, in that, yeah, you've started. You're mentally assenting and you're experiencing forgiveness. Yes, in that, I want to stand again, but you said no, so I'm do you remember that story in the Bible where Peter asks Jesus, how many times should I forgive? 7 times. And Jesus says, no, 7 times 7, depending on the translation, 7 times 70 or 77 times. So in the West, we think linear. We think, okay, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. Okay.
Yeah.
But not in the Middle East. Having been a chaplain and seeing bodies and different states of violence, the one that always stuck out to me were stab wounds. So you get you're stabbed, there's, the epidermis breaks, a bone might be chipped, an organ punctured, a vein cut, a muscle torn, nerves damaged, all from one wound. And so I believe what you might be experiencing is that God in his kindness started you on the journey of forgiveness, and you forgave that first layer, and now you're coming up against the next layer and the next injury. For some of you, you were too little, and you just received something awful from people who should have cared for you instead. That wound you've been covering and dealing with and carrying, and God in his mercy is coming to heal. And it feels painful, but because he loves you and he's for you, to make you the best version of yourself, to divinize you, he's uncovering the wound. But if you tell him no, he'll back off. But I assure you, it does feel like getting a tooth drilled. But in the end, you come out clean and healthy.
Well, Octavio, the final question we always ask our guests is what biblical principles have shaped your thoughts? There's been lots of biblical principles, but anything you want to close with today?
This is a room full of Protestants and maybe 1 or 2 Catholics. So all of you are familiar with the prayer called the Our Father, right? There's people still out here, right?
Yeah, there
Okay,
are. It's hard to see, but there are.
there's laughter, and a male laughter at that. So in the Our Father, which goes like this, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and, this is the key, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others. This is one of the few requests, and here is Christ teaching his disciples how to pray, where he makes this request contingent on our involvement. Now, I've tried for years to run away from that. How do I get around this contingency that I ask God for forgiveness as I forgive others? And if some of you are, like some of you, I get it. You're done with Christianity. You're at Biola because your parents sent you. And that's because you're not experiencing God, period. Period. And one reason why you may not be experiencing God is because you're so bottled up with crap from not forgiving that you're no longer able to experience the beauty that is your Father in heaven. And so Christ, to protect us, says, learn how to forgive so that you can receive and experience the forgiveness of your Father in heaven.
Discover who you're called to be at Biola University, a leading Christ-centered university in Los Angeles, with programs on campus and online. Subscribe for more of our videos and learn more at biola.edu.